You're listening to the Fort Erie Podcast, your local source for upcoming events, hot new listings, and bite-sized interviews with business and community leaders. Here's your host, Brent Jones.
Good morning and welcome to Season 2, Episode 9 of the Fort Erie Podcast. It is Tuesday, April 21st, 2020, and I'm your host, Brent Jones. And let me start this episode first just, issuing an apology for some of the sound issues last week. If you tuned into Episode 8, you might have noticed quite a bit of echo on my mic, and hopefully I've got that resolved for this week. My guest today is going to be a repeat guest from Season 1, Mr. Phil Smith, who you may know as a realtor with Royal LePage NRC Realty, a board member with the Crystal Beach BIA, and of course the owner of South Coast Cookhouse. But let's also talk about some local health heroes. Just to kick things off, I got to be honest with you, Fort Erie, you're maybe a little bit too generous with your praise, and that's a good thing. There were too many names, too many nominations at this point for me to keep up with. So this is going to be my last week covering local health heroes, despite all the praise they of course deserve. So I've put together a list here in no particular order of all of the outstanding nominations that I haven't yet covered. If your name is on this list, it means somebody locally here in town nominated you as a local health hero. Ready? Okay, here we go. Shout out to Alex Corton, Robin Sider, Dr. Nicholas Marcy, Dr. Claudius Che, Natalie Shirk, Darlene Miller, Natasha Amy, Valerie Fincher, Kathy McPherson, Sue Fletcher, Wendy Franz, Adrian DeHoog, I hope I'm saying these names right, Melanie Senecal, Martha McNeil Hicks, Mary Jane McNeil, Martin Robbins, Melanie Dixon, Terry Van Oosten, Jennifer Sorrell, Janet Thompson, Patty Newman, Karen Lindley, Davine Corrence, John Walpole, Darlene Lynn, Sharon Foreman Persati, Lynette McDonald Laws, Fiona Mercer, Jack Reinhart, Peter Purpura, Bill Moon, Dr. M.G. Kim, Tara Baker, Sarah McPhee, Carrie Adamick, and last but not least, Diane Parker. Thank you to all of you. Thank you so much for the service you provide, for taking care of people in our community. You truly are all local health heroes. Now, here's what's making news in Fort Erie at the moment. There have been quite a few changes to transit services in Fort Erie amid COVID-19. Most notably, the East Green Line has been suspended. The East Blue Line and West Yellow Lines now stop at 7 p.m. Travel is designated for essentials only, and all boarding must happen at the rear doors. So for details on this story and all stories I cover, check out the show notes below this episode. Next, last Tuesday, April 14th, Fort Erie resident Bird Sizzler celebrated his, get this, 105th birthday. With social distancing in effect, friends and family took part in a drive-by birthday party with a procession led by an old Fort Erie fire truck on Dominion Road. Happy belated birthday, Bird. And I'm not sure if you saw, but I was recently featured in Niagara this week, had a conversation with Nick Ferns talking about the impacts of COVID-19 on the real estate market. You can find a link to that article below this episode in the show notes. The crux of it is this: residential listings are down about 30% compared to this time last year. And my message to residents of Niagara region is this: if you can afford to wait right now to buy or sell, please do. All right, here's what's on your minds, Fort Erie. According to the Fort Erie Questions and Answers Facebook group, Jay asks, is there anywhere in town to get a haircut? The simple answer, with social distancing in effect, is no, although a few Fort Erie residents did chime in and suggest that, a pair of clippers in your own bathroom ought to do the trick in a pinch. Elizabeth asks, any recommendations for air conditioner companies? There were several answers, but the most popular answer I saw was Trades Plus on Buffalo Road. Okay, now let's get on to my chat with Phil Smith. Bear in mind, of course, as you're listening to this interview, that I spoke with Phil really back before all hell broke loose, before this pandemic started. So some of the references to what's happening in Crystal Beach or what's happening at South Coast may be a little outdated, but as I understand it, South Coast Cookhouse is currently offering takeout, possibly even delivery. Your best bet is to check the links in the show notes below this episode, get in touch with South Coast, and find out what exactly they have going on right now. All right, everybody, I am sitting down with return guest Phil Smith, owner of South Coast Cookhouse here in Crystal Beach. How are you, Phil?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me back. I had a blast the first time. I was after you to get me back because I had lots more to do. So
yeah, well, here we are.
Yeah, great.
It's worked out well. Actually, I wanted to make sure to have you back on because I did a survey with listeners at the end of season 1, and you were voted favorite guest of season 1. Did that surprise you?
Well, you know, I had my mom. My mom, she voted a few times. I had my Nana. We got her, so she's on it. So between my mom and my Nana and my brother, I think that really boosted me over the edge.
That sounds about right. So, well, last time you were on the show, we talked a lot about your involvement with the Crystal Beach BIA. Mm-hmm. This time, you know, we can still talk about some of the development in Crystal Beach for sure, but I'd like to touch on the restaurant business a bit too. For the benefit of people listening who maybe aren't familiar with South Coast, tell them a little bit about South Coast. Like, when did you get started? You know, who's the restaurant for?
Yeah, so South Coast opened up in 2008. I remember it was sort of a burnt out building, and we came in, and the guy who was going to be my finance guy said, "Oh, geez, you know, do you really think you can do this?" And I said, "Yeah, I think so." And he said, "Have you ever worked in a restaurant before?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, do you have any experience?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, what makes you think you can do it?" I said, "Well, my mom thinks we can do it." And I said, "Well, that's good enough for me." So we started. If I would have known then what I know now, maybe we would have started. But it's been awesome. We've expanded 3 or 4 times over the course of the 12 years that we've been open, and it's been a lot of fun. I tried to sort of model it after sort of like a Cheers or like a Buffalo type thing where you can go and have an anniversary. You can come in after work. You can come in by yourself. It's just sort of a comfortable place where you try to have good food, good portion, service good, and fair price, and good.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah, a lot of people know you, of course, as a realtor. Do you find people are surprised when they find out that you're? Do a lot of people not realize you also own South Coast?
Yeah, I you know, having the restaurant certainly sort of raises your profile a little bit, and some people know me from real estate and maybe from the restaurant, but yeah, so there's a lot of really, really awesome things that are happening in Crystal Beach, and you alluded to like the restaurants, right? Yeah. So there's a couple new restaurants. There's San Vito's, there's Casa Hugo that have opened up recently. I'm really pumped because we create a little bit of what's like a restaurant row, like a hub, mm-hmm. where you and your friends can come down and walk around. Places have live music, different types of food, different types of drink, and just become an area where you can park your car and walk around. The building across the street that we're doing, for those not familiar with the Ontario Hotel, like it's historically one of the bigger buildings in town, and everybody has a story from Crystal Beach about going to the Ontario Hotel, and you know, push comes to shove, a few drinks here and there, and just a funny story. So, but in the last 20 or so years, it sort of fell on hard times, and that's sort of like a microcosm of the beach itself, right? But a few years ago, we were able to buy it, and one by one, you know, renovating the units, breathing new life into them. A lot of Band-Aids had to be peeled off that building, a lot of stuff going on. So when all is said and done, there's going to be, you know, 21 new apartments there. There's going to be basically 7 units that are basically like a hotel, and there's going to be 10 small commercial areas. And so those spaces are designed for, you know, new business people. We obviously, with all the people coming to Ridgeway, Crystal Beach, and Fort Erie, more people present more opportunity. The idea is to create spaces that aren't what you think of when you think of a rental. You think of a rental like, oh, it's sort of a rundown sort of place. No, we want to have exposed ductwork, exposed brickwork, stainless steel appliance, like really to make it where people are choosing to live, and maybe sort of that urban lifestyle, that sort of walkable, bikeable, with you walk down to the coffee shop, walk across the street to the bar, and it's been very, very well received so far. So
beautiful, beautiful. Well, hey, listeners may or may not realize this, but during our first conversation, we actually did a rapid fire question.
Yes.
And I ended up cutting it from the final episode. It never made it to the light of day because you and I always have so much to talk about. It feels like, you know, something had to give. So I want to make sure we fit in the rapid fire question round this time. So we'll put about 60 seconds on the clock, and I'm going to rattle through some questions, and you just blurt out the first answer that comes to mind. You ready?
Okay.
Okay, here we go. What type of milk do you put on your cereal?
Oh, good question. I'm a smoothie guy.
Smoothie.
I go smoothie, so
okay.
I'm a smoothie guy in the morning.
Would you rather be besties with Beyonce or Rihanna?
Oh boy, I'd say Beyonce. She seems like a real boss. She seems like somebody I could really learn a lot from.
Did you ever believe in Santa Claus?
I still do.
Our dogs.
Wait a second.
What?
What do you mean believe in Santa Claus?
Oh, I ruined it for you, man.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
We'll
I'm sorry.
talk about that afterwards.
Are dogs people?
Yes, they are.
Have you ever been to Europe?
I have.
Would you eat a day-old donut from Avondale?
Pass. No, I don't think I would. I'm not a big donut guy, but probably not.
Okay, well, what's the most number of hours you've watched TV in a single day?
I'm not a big TV watcher guy, but I can do a little Netflix binge. We'll say maybe 3 or 4.
And lastly, if you had to pick some songs to describe your career, what would they be?
Oh, wow. Well, I would say 9 to 5 by Dolly Parton.
Okay.
Working 9 to 5.
Uh-huh.
Except in real estate, it's like working 9 till 9.
Sure.
But I would say Taking Care of Business. Taking Care of Business by Bachman Turner Overdrive, right? So just get it done, right?
Absolutely.
So keep grinding.
Well, let's conclude the episode with this. If you were going to go have dinner somewhere in Crystal Beach, or let's say Greater Fort Erie as a whole, and it couldn't be your own restaurant, where would you go?
There's a lot of good restaurants around. I'm fond of the Barrel. I'm fond of San Vito's, and Casa Hugo just recently opened, and so we have a lot of good options in town. But I'd probably say in a pinch, I'd say the Barrel. I like going to the Barrel. It's just you get good food. Right. It's great there. I agree.
Anything that you could add, I guess, just in conclusion, that might surprise people about the restaurant business? Maybe they wouldn't have expected.
That might be a whole other separate podcast. But there's a lot of things that go in behind it, and we're so lucky. Like honestly, I don't have the secret formula. There's a lot of great restaurants that have opened up and not made it, and then so we feel super fortunate. Like I don't know what the winning recipe is, but I guess just you want to have good atmosphere, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on in behind, and dealing with employees is all those sort of things. But it's a tough racket, it's a tough business, a lot of competition, but it can be really rewarding too, and it's a lot of fun to be able to see something that you've helped to create, and people treat it as like they're local, their spot to go. Right. And we actually, just not taking too much time, but we had a couple people last year who had their first date here who have gotten married. A couple of them came back in like on their wedding day in their wedding dresses and stuff, tuxedos, to take pictures of where they met and had their first date. That is so awesome. It's been a lot of fun, and it's been a great experience overall for sure.
Beautiful. Great. Well, I'll put links, of course, in the show notes to everything the South Coast Cookhouse is up to. Thank you so much for being my return guest, Phil. Thanks for being on the show.
Well, I hope I can come back for season 3.
Well, we'll do our best.
Okay, that was a non-committal
Get
commitment.
your mom to vote for you again, I guess.
I'll get my mom on the keyboard. She'll be all set.
Welcome back, everybody. Have you ever wondered why you ought to work with a realtor like myself or like Phil instead of trying to do it all yourself? Here to answer that question is my friend, colleague, and teammate, Cheryl O'Hearn.
Oh, there's a number of reasons that I would suggest that people should work with an agent to sell their home as opposed to trying to do it themselves, starting with safety. We'd like to think that we can take them at face value, but sometimes we can't. So we do the best that we can to pre-qualify people by asking questions that our experience has taught us that the homeowner may not know. And I think sometimes people are uncomfortable with the homeowner. If they're present, they may not open doors, look in closets, look under sinks. Just really be as thorough in examining the home as they would if those people aren't there.
And once again, we're back. Folks, I'm inviting you to join me next Tuesday for another brand new episode of the Fort Erie Podcast. It'll be Season 2, Episode 10. If you can believe it, there were only 2 more episodes left to go in Season 2, Episodes 10 and 11. So next week, I'll be joined by Antoinetta Kulik, Marketing and Media Manager at the Fort Erie Racetrack, and I'm sure she'll have plenty to share with us. So long, everybody. Stay safe and stay healthy out there.
You've been listening to the Fort Erie Podcast with your host, Brent Jones, a sales representative with RE/MAX Niagara Realty Limited Brokerage. Follow @BuyWithBrent on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for updates. Subscribe to the Fort Erie Podcast on popular platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and catch a new bite-sized episode every week. Until next time.